Hello, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Silmarillion Film Project. I am your co-host, Dave Kale, and this is our special 2 weeks early Thanksgiving episode because we basically all of us are busy for the next few weeks, so we're not going to be able to do one before Thanksgiving. So this is it, and this week we'll be giving thanks for a variety of things, which include the petty dwarves and the fascinating Sindar storylines that we'll be covering, and in particular for all the exciting Tolkien screen adaptation news that we've received over the last week, which, we will be covering that at the start of this episode. Unfortunately, we aren't joined this week by Trish Lambert. She's off doing better things, but at least we do have myself, Dave Kale, and as always, the Tolkien Professor Corey Olson. Good morning, Professor Olson. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I am excellent, thanks, Dave. Good to have you back with us again in a more stable and less transitory fashion.
Not on a metro.
Yes.
Train noise in the background. Driving in dead spots.
Absolutely.
Although now the trade-off is now I'm home, but instead of train noise, what I have a little person tapping me on the leg,
right,
and trying to talk at me.
Hey, that's much more. That's much cuter than train noises.
That's true. He may chime in on the petty dwarves. We'll see.
Well, I know he has some fairly strong opinions about them, so
yes.
It's not surprising. But cool. All right, so
where should we start?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the last thing we're going to start with is the actual episode, because there's a whole bunch of things that have come up that we need to talk about. So first, we should. I've been forbearing to talk about this in any of my other broadcasts because it's most obviously relevant to SilmFilm and the kind of thing that we're doing here. As lots of people have been mentioning SilmFilm on Twitter this past week, since of course the news broke about Amazon in negotiations to acquire the rights to do a Lord of the Rings episodic adaptation. First, though, before we even get to that, coming out sooner than that and far more definite is the Tolkien biopic that's on the way. And I have to admit, I've been pretty much trying to ignore that the Tolkien biopic is happening. It's possible that it's going to be really good and going to surprise me. There are two things that there are two reasons why I'm not excited about the Tolkien biopic at all. I'm not saying I'm I'm a little bit anti, I guess, but anyway, here the two things that I dislike about the idea of a Tolkien biopic is, thing number one is any time people draw attention to Tolkien's life, it's almost always in an attempt to explain things about the books in what I find to be really clumsy and insufficient ways. I'm not saying that all attention to his biography is irrelevant to understanding his stories, and that understanding his life can't help us at all understand his stories. For a really good example of how that can be done really well, I would point to John Garth in his book Tolkien and the Great War. That's an excellent book and an excellent way, an excellent illustration of how understanding things about Tolkien's life can help us understand some things or appreciate some things better about his books. So I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's usually done badly. Like, the fact that John Garth did it well doesn't change the fact that it's usually done badly. Anyway, so I'm just kind of dreading the sort of weight, in a sense, that's going to have.
When you say done badly, what's your concern?
That people tend to want to just find explanations for the stories in his life. Like, he wrote that because this happened in his life, and it's like, that's, I can't even begin to talk about how much I hate that, because it cheapens
my concern as well is that we're not going to get an actual Tolkien biopic that's focused on his life. We're going to get a oh, why is this thing happening in the Lord of the Rings? Because this thing happened. So we're not going to get like a Tolkien biopic. What we're going to get is a sort of a narrative, a fictionalized narrative of Tolkien that's been crowbarred into the story structure of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there's so many ways in which it can be bad and so few ways in which it can be good that but here's my other not fear. Here's the other reason why I'm not excited about, or rather, this is the reason why I'm even more trepidatious about it. Tolkien's life was boring. Tolkien lived World War I was interesting. He was in World War I, right? And World War I is interesting. When he comes back, after he comes back from World War I, his life from then on is boring by all outward. I mean, his like romance with his wife in their early years, that's also interesting, right? The whole like forbidden love thing. He falls in love with an older girl, and like he wants to, and it was forbidden to see her by his guardian, and then he comes back and until he's 21, and then he comes back when he's 21 to find she's already engaged to somebody else, and then he goes and he wins her over, and she breaks off her engagement with the other dude and marries him. Like, okay, like that's kind of interesting. But after that, I'm telling you, after he comes back from World War I, he like works for the dictionary, raises a family, and like has chickens in his backyard. Is it done? And like writes in his spare time. His life is not interesting. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine a feature film that is going to talk about his life in any kind of big picture sense and not add lots and lots of unnecessary and unhistorical drama. Because how could anyone possibly make an interesting movie out of Tolkien's post-age 21 life?
You don't think they're going to have a high suspense scene of him writing a strongly worded letter to Stanley Unwin?
Right. Or like, and this summer, Tolkien has to grade exams and complain about it a lot. I mean, like, it's just not, again, I'm not saying his life was bad. I'm just saying his life was not like dramatic movie material, really.
Do you think they'll have him do a scene of him coming in and reciting Beowulf?
See, I mean, like, that's interesting for like 30 seconds, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's interesting for 30 seconds and about a couple dozen people.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine them doing this film if the intention is to make a film that will have at least some broad appeal. It's really hard to imagine them not taking a lot of license.
A lot of license. Yes, exactly.
I'm looking at the Daily Mail article talking about Nicholas Hoult being cast as him, which is kind of an interesting, that's kind of a cool casting, I guess. I'm looking at that, scrolling down. They have like lots of shots of people from the set in costume. It's like, oh, it's a cool period piece. And then I scroll down and I see a photo of Elijah Wood and Sean Astin and Gollum. And I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
There it is already, right?
There it is.
Not even in the film, but people are already doing it in just the media coverage.
Yeah. And so a couple of people, Brian and Marielle, have said they could focus more on the Inklings, and that would be fun. Well, no. I mean, it depends on what you consider fun, right? I mean, the Inklings also not interesting, not dramatic. Again, interesting, very interesting people. And there's no question that hanging out at the Bergman Baby with the Inklings would have been awesome. But I don't think it would be a good movie. I mean, like these guys sitting there and like talking, like debating literature and philosophy and like, hey, let's do a long scene in which like, Charles Williams reads a chapter from his, latest crazy novel. Like, that's not going to be in the movie. Like, that would not be interesting. So yeah.
I like Marielle's suggestion. if they could do it like Midnight in Paris style, which is a pretty fantastic movie. But first of all, have you seen that movie, Corey?
I haven't. No.
Oh, you should watch those films. It's a trilogy from oh shoot, I can't remember the guy's name. The guy who did Boyhood as well. Midnight in Paris. What is Richard Linklater? Richard Linklater. That's it. He's famous for these kinds of films. They're like Midnight in Paris is interesting in that. Oh wait, no, Midnight in Paris is Woody Allen. I'm confused. I was thinking about Before Midnight, but actually that would work too. But anyway, something where it's like, you know, like a very indie drama with good, like really really good, like, you know, extended dialogue scenes, like long shots and things like that. But still, first of all, I'm still not convinced that you have anything going on in Tolkien's life that will be able to drive the dramatic tension in any kind of way. Like, it's hard to imagine what's the climax of this film going to be. Right.
What's the arc? What's the story? Is it about his producing the Lord of the Rings? You know, like is that like that? Would the climax be the publication of the Lord of the Rings? I don't even know exactly what the climax would be.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. Like, if they did, it'd be cool if they maybe just focused on his romance, or maybe just focused on his World War I experiences. But I doubt that's what they'll do. And yeah, it's hard to imagine. The other thing too is that people just, like, these films don't tend to do well commercially. Like these like little indie films, and usually. And so, you know, like we kind of went, like, the heyday of these kinds of films was like the 90s, where you would get a lot of these like Forget Paris type, you know, You've Got Mail type, romantic comedy, drama type things. These kinds of films really just don't get made and don't typically do well commercially, especially at least in the U.S. market, which means that usually when you're making such films, you try to go super low budget indie. Because that's the only hope you have of not being a flop. But maybe that's what they're doing here, but given that they have the Tolkien estate, like they have the license for the Tolkien name, it's hard to believe that's what they're doing. Yeah. And I'm more tempted to think that they're, you know, spending a lot of money to make this, which means they have to try and do something to make it more dramatic and I'm not optimistic.
No, I'm really not either. And I mean, maybe it'll surprise me. And, you know, several people are suggesting that, like, you know, maybe it will just be a quiet character study without trying to, you know, ramp things up into high drama and everything, which is, you know, and if it is, awesome, you know, that would be great. If they want to do that, or if they want to, you know, highlight like his academic career, like his academic and writing life and stuff. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't be interested in that. I'm just saying I can't imagine many other people would be interested in that. You know,
maybe they're just making this film for you.
Yeah, but maybe if so, then that's a poor idea, because I'll go see it. I have to see it. I'm, like, you know, obligated to see it, but yeah, this doesn't excite me. But anyway, we'll see. we'll see what happens. But I have low expectations. I have nothing against it so far. I mean, I know nothing against it. I just have low expectations because it's hard for me to imagine. But maybe that is just a testimony to the paucity of my own imagination rather than to the actual likelihood of what they will produce. Who knows? But as for the other thing, the Amazon series, obviously, I shouldn't need to tell people here in the SilmFilm world that I think this is a good idea. You know, and first of all, I think that, you know, and Dave, you and I talked about this on Twitter briefly. I think that a lot of people are overreacting to the Game of Thrones comparison that has been very publicly made about this. I don't think that when they say they want to do it in Game of Thrones style, that necessarily means that they want to have it focused on politics and sex. Like I think that is, I mean, I'm not saying that it's impossible that that's what they're going to want. I'm just saying that I don't think that that's what that translates to. A lot of people are translating it that way, and I don't think that that's what that translates to, at least not necessarily. I think that it means it could mean nothing other than epic storytelling done episodically, with like a high budget and great acting. I mean, it could simply mean that.
Well, I will say, as one of the purveyors of the gloom and doom, they're just going to sex it up thesis, I will admit that I do think, like, from what I've read in the coverage and stuff, which there were signs of this during the Harvey Weinstein Amazon Studios executives, sexual harassment scandals. But they were mentioning that Jeff Bezos had basically gone to Amazon Studios and given them a mandate that said, you guys have made some really great, critically acclaimed indie, kinds of series like Transparent. I want you to stop doing that, and I want you to focus on making one big cultural phenomenon like Game of Thrones. So I do think that is the primary goal. The primary goal is
cultural phenomenon.
Is like a water cooler show that's like appointment viewing that millions of people watch, and even more millions of people steal off the internet.
Right.
Now, my concern is that, knowing sort of the way folks in this industry often think, that there'll be a tendency for them to think, if we're going to make a show that's as popular as Game of Thrones, what made Game of Thrones popular? Oh, it's going to be these various elements, and that's what I'm concerned about, because I do think, like, when you look at like the coverage, like the Monday morning podcasts and blog posts and articles that discuss Game of Thrones, there is at least as much attention paid to, some bloody battle or some guy skewering somebody, or so-and-so's nude scene, as there is to, oh, what a great character moment there was between these two characters, right? So that I'm a little... And I'm kind of concerned that I don't know. I guess in the abstract, I agree with you that like the idea of an episodic adaptation is a good idea. What I'm concerned about is, for all the faults that I can find with Peter Jackson's movies and the work that he did, I feel like he still demonstrated a certain amount of respect for the material and like a real concern. And I'm just, I guess I'm expressing anxiety about whether they will, if Amazon were to do this, would they manage to find somebody like that to put in charge of it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, the one thing that several stories that I've read about it, and I've not read dozens, but one thing that I saw mentioned, which I did not know, Jeff Bezos is a fan. Jeff Bezos is apparently a Tolkien fan. Yeah. And that's why he was
thing in the Bay Area and among the tech folks.
Right. Yes. Hardly unknown among the tech folks in the Bay Area. Yeah, I know. But that at least one story I read was suggesting that that's one of the reasons why Jeff Bezos himself took a hand and steered it to say, like, we should get the Lord of the Rings because he's a fan. Now, again, as Marielle, as you say, I don't know what that means exactly, but I don't know. It's perhaps that would be if there is some kind of fandom on his part, in addition to simply calculated, I think this will make us lots of money, then that would at least help. The thing that's been most interesting to me is the reactions. It's been making me feel old, frankly, because I remember when the news of when Peter, like Peter Jackson, I know I'm not that old, and I know many of you also remember like hearing the first news releases when like the Peter Jackson movies were being discussed. When you first heard the news that a feature film adaptation of The Lord of the Rings was on its way. I remember that, and I remember fan reaction to that, and what I'm hearing from so many people sounds exactly like that, except with Peter Jackson accepted as canon. Like, and I'm just like hearing people be like, "Oh, but like Peter Jackson's treatment is so wonderful. How could they possibly do anything else?" And I'm like, these are exactly the people who would have been like, "Oh no, the books are so wonderful. They're totally going to ruin it no matter what happens." And I don't know. I've just been I've been sort of surprised at people's response to say, people who say, "But the Peter Jackson films were so excellent. Why would we possibly need another adaptation?" I love the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films. They are wonderful films. Do I think that they've done everything that can be done with adaptation? Heck no! Especially since if we were just talking about doing another trilogy of films, that would be different. That would be harder. But this is a totally different, as we've seen in SilmFilm, this is a totally different adaptation project with so much more potential to be able to to cover so much more story, and a much broader epic sweep. I sure hope that I'm gonna try to see if I can get connected with Amazon. I would love to consult on this, and if I did, I would encourage them not to start at the unexpected party, but to start earlier, to do like the build up, to do something like the epic story of
season should take place in Hobbiton.
Well, no, I'm thinking like start at have the first episode be like the end of the Battle of the Last Alliance, or like the loss of the ring at at the Gladden Fields, or something like that, and do like the Third Age. That would be, it would be awesome. But whatever, like basically get the fall of the North, like the wars of the North Kingdom and Angmar in there. Get Gondor and the plagues and wars and the ride of Eorl the Young, and let's do it. Like do the whole thing. Show how the War of the Ring is the culmination of the Third Age rather than this sort of isolated thing. It would be so much fun. And Marielle, in that case, we would totally do Tom Bombadil. Yeah, the arrival of the Astari. That's another great starting point. Let's do the arrival of the Astari. Why not? Anyway, I just, there's so much, like, this is such a different, I feel like people are underestimating. And again, certainly the SilmFilm project has taught me, something about how this kind of an adaptation project is different from the feature films. This just can't... especially after doing Riddles in the Dark and then doing SilmFilm, I now feel more pity than anger for Jackson in the Hobbit films, because my goodness, I would never want to make a feature film out of this stuff, even something like The Hobbit. This kind of storytelling, I like this kind of storytelling so much better. But anyway, to me, it's such a different project that I just can't understand people who are like, but it's already been done. Why are they doing it again? I don't get it. Like,
well, I think, at least my sort of, to the extent that I have feelings like that, I have, can you hear the banging in the background? That's good, Wally.
It's all right.
To the extent that I have feelings like that, I think it's informed by by my wife's sort of role in the industry, where they're sort of like, we would prefer to see an appetite from the big companies that produce stuff for new ideas and new stories of the kind that someone like her would tell, rather than just like buying the same property over and over again.
All right.
So I think that's part of it.
Sure.
I think the other thing for me, is sort of like which I think I'll readily admit is performing crit fic, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of on the one, like, again, in the abstract, I agree with you. Like, yeah, this creates a lot of opportunities. On the other hand, I'm like, do I think, do I believe that the people, once they end up, working on an episodic long form adaptation of Lord of the Rings, do I actually believe that they will look and say, well, now we've got room for at least one Tom Bombadil episode? Or in mapping out the season, are they going to say, is there maybe going to be one like weirdo in the room that's going to be like, hey, we can do Tom Bombadil, and everybody's going to turn and glare at him and be like, no, we're still not doing Tom Bombadil. But you know what we have room for? Another made-up action scene.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
sure.
And maybe that's not fair. Maybe if people are going to do the adaptation, maybe we should actually wait and see how it turns out rather than making assumptions about what they'll do.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, as far as your first point about, you would rather see them do new things than just, redo the same properties again and again. I'm sympathetic to that. And I wouldn't say, for that reason, I wouldn't say that I would have pitched this, my relationship with it is simply, well, if they're going to do it, then I'm excited that and I think it could be good. But yeah, so I mean, whether or not in the abstract it is a good idea for them to do this kind of thing, right now, I'm perfectly ready to be convinced that it would be better for them to do other things. But if they're going to do this, I think they could do it well, and I don't despair that it could be done well. But the other thing is, again, like, is it just going to be more action scenes? Are they going to be true to the book? Again, I remember these conversations 20 years ago, when a little bit less than 20 years ago, when the rumors of Peter Jackson's film came out. This is exactly what we were all saying. Oh my goodness, what are they going to do? All of these scenarios. And now, and again, just, so this is why it's so ironic to me to hear people saying exactly the same things, while at the same time they're like, but Peter Jackson did it really well. It's like, well, doesn't the fact that we all had these misgivings, and then the films turned out to be way better than we expected, like, can't that serve as a precedent for us to, like, throttle back the panic and to maybe suspend the assumptions that they're obviously going to do it badly? That's the fact that those two incompatible views, the panic that it's the assumption that it's going to be done poorly, with the defense of Peter Jackson as the having already done it perfectly.
Right. The defense of the guy who we previously believed would do it poorly.
Exactly. And it's like, don't you remember that we had these same fears about Peter Jackson, and now that doesn't prove that it's going to turn out well a second time. It could be absolutely dreadful, but it might not, so, like, why should we just be gloomy about it?
I just, what I hope, I guess here's what I'm hopeful for. I agree with you that if they have people involved who understand the story, as opposed to hiring some writers, none of whom have read the book, and who will, like, go through and, quick read the Lord of the Rings, over the course of a week before they have to start breaking storylines, who don't know any of the background, don't dig into the appendices, never looked at the Silmarillion. My hope is they don't have people like that. Instead, they, hey, this is a good reason, Amazon, to hire someone like Corey to help out with this. If they had somebody who can look and say, guys, we don't have to just follow the main story.
No.
There's all this other really interesting storytelling that we can do around events that are only loosely referenced in the main text, and maybe only have scant details in the appendix. And that not only would that be interesting, but actually, I think I imagine a lot of the writers in the room would actually really relish having the opportunity to kind of work, do some storytelling in an area where it hasn't already been laid out for them.
Yes.
That's my hope. My hope is that they'll think outside the box and do that thing.
Me too. I
hire
think
Corey.
I agree. No, I mean, I would love to do this, and of course with me, I can't help, but think, it's like, okay, like, I was too young when The Lord of the Rings came out. I mean, it makes me feel old. Several people, both Karita and Marielle are like, I was 7 or I was 9 when the movies came out. I wasn't part of that, dread and anticipation the first time. That's exactly why this is making me feel old, because when I'm talking to folks on Twitter about this, I'm continually getting the sense of, okay, you weren't around when the Peter Jackson movies are coming out. You don't remember this period, the last time it came around, and now I'm feeling old.
Even I was in college when they came out, and even I don't really remember. I don't remember being emotionally involved before the movies came out enough to have like a sense of dread.
Yeah.
It wasn't until, and I really, really enjoyed them the first time I saw them, and it wasn't until I went back and reread the books after seeing the films that I started to see discrepancies and started thinking more critically about the adaptation. So,
right.
So even I wasn't part of the sort of chorus of naysayers before it came out.
Yeah.
So I've certainly participated after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think. Yeah. I mean, I was in grad school when the Peter Jackson movies came out, so I was, I wasn't in any kind of position to be involved, or there's absolutely no. I was merely another Tolkien fan at the time. Now that I've spent the last decade, talking about this stuff and kind of being in the world, I would love to. I would love to be involved. That would be so much fun. But we'll see.
We got to create some kind of. We need a Twitter campaign with a hashtag, Corey.
That would be fun. I think it's too early, right? Because
that's true. They haven't even acquired the rights.
They haven't even acquired the rights yet.
There's probably good reason to be skeptical that they will.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, actually. That's another thing that it's kind of interested me, is that some people are like, what? How is this possible? Why would the estate, because the articles have been saying that the estate is in conversation with them, and they're like, why would the estate even do this? I actually am not surprised, because you remember the lawsuit, right? The big lawsuit that was going, that the estate was levying against Middle-earth Enterprises and the rest of them about the slot machines and stuff?
Yep.
If
you're looking for a respectful adaptation of Tolkien's material that he would in fact approve, it's slot machines.
Slot machines, exactly. Right. So that was settled, right? They settled that lawsuit finally after years. They settled that. It wasn't that long ago. Wasn't it like a year ago? Within the last year or something like that, they finally settled that lawsuit. Well, I remember when I read about the settlement of the lawsuit, the language. So, like in the press statement that the Tolkien estate released, they released this friendly settlement, statement on the settlement, where I remember language from their statement that said explicitly, and we look forward to working with them working together with them again in the future. They made explicit overtures in their press statement that, as I recall, that suggested, this is not we have had this long and irritating lawsuit, but we're not burning our bridges, essentially. So when it was released that they were working with them again, I'm like, actually, it kind of sounded like they were setting that up, frankly, in the in their statement. So I was not shocked. Anyhow.
Also, I mean, people have to remember. Go back and read your Tolkien letters. He was always of a mind, he was never he was maybe skeptical of the enterprise of adapting The Lord of the Rings into a screen adaptation, and was never very satisfied with any of the treatments or scripts that he received. But he wasn't, but the fact is, what we have is a crap ton of letters between him and the folks wanting to adapt it. Not one single letter from him saying, nope, won't do it. Yes. He was always of a mind to he was always perfectly fine with doing it. And people should remember that his conditions were either significant creative control or big bag of money.
Yes.
And he was perfectly fine with saying, "You can have it, and
as long as I get a big bag of money."
Give me a big bag of money. You can have it and do whatever you want to. I'm very skeptical it'll turn out fine, but I don't care.
Yes. Again, he
didn't seem to have all these concerns about films ruining books or anything that we seem to have, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. And in part, I suspect it's because film was in a different cultural place then than it is now, I think.
Yeah.
I think that he did not imagine a world in which film could actually supplant books, as like, or like sort of infringe upon the cultural place of books. So I personally, I think that's a big part of it. But Marielle said exactly. So would most fathers, I think, that have 4 college tuitions to pay for. Again, boring life. Family always just trying to figure out how can remember. This is a guy who graded extra exams in the summertime to make ends meet so that he could pay for Christopher's medical bills and put his kids through school. So, he was just interested in providing for his family. And again, people do always forget, when people are like, "Oh, what would Tolkien say?" I always say to them, let's not forget, Tolkien sold the rights. Like, he had the rights, he sold the rights, so yeah, definitely.
Yes. Now, slot machines, that's a whole other.
Slot machines, yes. Yeah.
I suspect he would strongly disapprove of that whole endeavor.
I agree. That, I think, is a very different thing.
His work being used to brand orc work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think he would have some very strong words to say about that.
On the other hand, I have played some of those Lord of the Rings slot machines. They're actually really fun.
Confessions now. Yeah. Oh, well.
Now, there's an interesting question from Nick Palazzo. How would Tolkien feel about Lord of the Rings Legos? I think he'd be fine with it.
I think so. I don't think he would strongly object to the Lego sets.
I mean, Legos seem sort of like, in essence, are the sorts of things that he was very supportive of, like kids playing, building their own, like Legos are like the ultimate physical world building tool.
Yeah. And he liked, his kids having, like bricks, like blocks to play with, Nick, he did complain about little plastic toys in relation to Snow White, but there we're talking about like little like figurines, like just buying plastic junk that will then, that's related to the movie that will then just sit around. So he, but Legos are, I don't know, Legos are not exactly the same thing.
So I guess we'll keep a close eye on developments.
Definitely keep a close eye on developments. And as far as, Nick, you were asking about, wouldn't, if I did consult on the Lord of the Rings film, wouldn't that impinge upon, season 50 to 55 or whatever it is when we get to the Lord of the Rings in SilmFilm? No. Because even if like everything worked out perfectly and I were to be like this major creative consult on the film, I have no doubt that it would not end up being exactly I think it would be cathartic to like do it the way I would want it to be done rather than the way.
By the time we get there, it'll be time for another reboot.
Exactly. Yeah. It'll be time for another reboot. Exactly.
It'll be at least 5 years from now, which means it'll be fair game.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, 5 years before we get to the Lord of the Rings? Are you kidding me? It's gonna be 5 years before we get to Turin Bar.
Yeah, of course it'll be much longer. I'm just saying that if it's 5 years or more, it's fair game for reboot.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly right. Okay. So
Maybe if this works out, Amazon will buy Dresden Files and adapt that next.
hey, that would be interesting to see done well. That would be a good series as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Hey, I have an idea. Let's talk about the Silmarillion now.
Yeah.
So, oh no, wait. Okay, yes. Let's talk about the Silmarillion, but not yet about episode 5 because so so Nick was reporting some pushback. So they just did the full outline of the kinslaying. So we have to go back and spend like a third episode now talking about the kinslaying. Apparently, Nick says that everyone hates the fact that we wanted to have Galadriel involved. Like there was vehement pushback against the idea of. So we were suggesting, as I recall, and I'm kind of taking people's words on this because I never remember what I say. So we were saying that Galadriel was going to be like, she was going to be with Fingolfin's folks, right? And they're the ones who are charging in against the elves on the bridge because they see the elves on the bridge shooting the Feanorians, and it looks like an ambush. And the confirmation of everything that Feanor said about like how they're being held prisoner by the Valar, and here are the Teleri being like the instruments of the Valar to entrap and ambush the Noldor and prevent them from leaving. So Fingolfin charges to take the bridge and to prevent them from killing the Noldor, from shooting the Noldor, and we had Galadriel charging with them and then stomping when she saw her mom up on the bridge. And so the objection was for her that like why would she be charging at all? And that she doesn't actually commit violence, but we had talked about wanting her to be like on the cusp of committing violence, and people really, really hated this. Apparently, why? My first question is, what is the motivation for hating it? I can imagine two, right? One, that it just seems out of character for her to even contemplate violence against people that she would consider her own people, as they're her mother's people, right? So she's half Teleri, half Noldor, so why would she automatically side with the Noldor to the extent of actually even contemplating violence against the Teleri? I can see that. And the second would just be the desire to, like, the hatred of seeing Galadriel make a bad choice like that, essentially. See, I don't like the idea of the possibilities for Galadriel, right? There are basically three possibilities, right? Either option one, she fights or at least goes to fight on the side of the Noldor. Option two, she fights or goes to fight on the side of the Teleri. Option three, she does nothing, right? Of those three options, I think her fighting on the side of the Teleri is to me the only unacceptable one. I do not see that happen. The reason I don't see that happening is, first of all, why is that any less objectionable than her fighting on the side of the Noldor against the Teleri, right? If she's half Teleri, she's also half Noldor, and she has more reason to believe, because of the way she's come in with the Noldor and still sort of under the influence of Feanor's speech, even if she was resistant to it. Nevertheless, like, she has lots of reasons to be suspicious about what the Teleri are doing, and lots of reasons to be kind of biased in favor of the Noldor here. Exactly, Marielle, and she doesn't know who started the fight. So I can construct a psychological state in which she comes in and thinks suddenly, shockingly to herself, that the Teleri are the bad guys here. It's hard for me, much harder for me to see that she is going to come in and think and perceive that, like, the Noldor are doing something wrong. It just doesn't work with how we've set it up. I don't like it. I don't think it works. But the second thing, for me, the most important thing, I want to resist. I very strongly want to resist. Depicting in our version of Galadriel, Aragorn's statement that on Galadriel there is no stain, right? When he leaps to defend Galadriel in the Fellowship of the Ring, right? Speak no ill of the Lady Galadriel, he says to Boromir, right? On her and on all this land there is no stain. First of all, Aragorn's wrong when he says that. Aragorn is wrong. He is defending his grandmother-in-law, and that is great. He may actually believe it. It is not true. It is not true. Galadriel has a stain. She has more than one stain on her. So I absolutely do not want to depict a pure as the driven snow Galadriel all the way through. Galadriel, I think that she needs to go through a repenting process. I think that her story is going to be it's first of all true to, of course there's so many different versions of Galadriel, you can say that any one of them, any version is true to a version of Tolkien's Galadriel, but my favorite of the Galadriel threads is a Galadriel who screws up, a Galadriel who is overproud, a Galadriel who needs to repent and takes longest, in a sense. Like, she's not just the last of the Noldor left. There's a reason she's the last of the Noldor left. She's the last of the Noldor left because she has some of the biggest issues of any of the Noldor. It takes her that long to work out her issues before she goes back to Valinor. There's a reason why she doesn't. There are several reasons, perhaps, why she doesn't go back to Valinor, go back to Elvenhome at the end, after the War of Wrath, and they're not all admirable. Anyway, so I think it's, I know that there is something very attractive in Aragorn's version of things, right? In Gimli's version of things, seeing her as just like the one up on the pedestal. And I can't wait to do Galadriel's story, right? To show her as a complex, problematic figure who is not doing things great. She's not turning green and stuff, but she is still, like, she's got issues, right? Remember, in a sense, what we get with Galadriel, and this is the thing that's to me most interesting about the different versions of Galadriel that we see Tolkien contemplating in his later writings. And there's a reason, this is also the reason why I dislike the loftiest Galadriels. He wants to make Galadriel like, she's like the female Fëanor, essentially. She's like, she becomes like second greatest of all of the Noldor. Right, Fëanor is still the greatest. I mean, there's nobody who had greater skills, right, greater potential than Fëanor. Galadriel grows and grows and grows pretty quickly until she is like almost as great, but not as great. Not quite as great as Fëanor, but greater than almost anybody else. But guess what? Guess what happens to the characters who are the greatest? They're the ones who experience temptation, and most of them fall. Right? The fact that Galadriel repents. I would love to show Galadriel. Remember, like in season 2, when we were doing Fall a lot, and we had Galadriel. No, not Galadriel. We had like Fëanor and Melkor, both of them, right? We were talking about like that point of no return, like that. There's an earlier point where they in their hearts are like choosing the wrong direction, right? But still, it's not until there comes a point when they cross a line from which they can't come back. And we were talking about how for Morgoth that should be the darkening of Valinor, right? After he destroys the trees and returns to Middle-earth and sets himself, like, he's done, there is no more repentance. He could conceivably have actually repented as he was faking it before, but now he's set himself in motion. With Fëanor, it's the same thing, and I think that moment is not the kinslaying, but the burning of the ships. Right? The burning of the ships is Fëanor's point of no return. He is done after that. He cannot repent after he burns the ships. Galadriel, the glory of Galadriel's story should be not that she never does anything wrong, not that she's always everybody's favorite character who's always like, who upon her there is no stain. The glory of Galadriel's character is that she'll be another one of those great and mighty high ones who has the potential to fall and who almost does, but doesn't cross the line and does repent in the end and is wholly redeemed at the end of the story. That is the cool thing. And to take that and to reconcile that with Aragorn's admiration and Gimli's adoration in the Fellowship of the Ring, right? I love that. I love the fact that like the way in which they're going to look to the way that the audience could potentially receive that line, right? When Aragorn says, "Upon the Lady of Lorien there is no stain," right? And you know that. Imagine, and I'm not saying we literally do this, but I'm sort of like imagining the Galadriel character sort of looking into the camera and like exchanging this glance with the audience, like, you know, I know that that's not true, and yet we can see why Aragorn would say that, right? And in a sense, it's true, right? Not literally true, not that there never has been any stain, but anyway, do you see what I mean? I mean, like, that's so much more powerful. And I think, this is why I think for me, the final versions I find very disappointing, and I'm really glad Tolkien did not implement the final versions of Galadriel, you know, as he was contemplating Galadriel and making her more and more lofty and just like having no part in the kinslaying and having no and having no truck with Fëanor from the beginning, setting her up as this wholly independent one who just came to Middle-earth on her own and didn't even cross the Helcarax or anything because she was always this like perfect one who was always trying to do everything right. That story, I mean, I would say this to Tolkien's face, is I don't think that is true to the rest of Tolkien's stories. It doesn't fit with the rest of Tolkien's stories. That's not how the greatest ones act. It's not the kind of career path that the greatest ones have, right? That's a weaker story than the stories that he tells of other people. Not even like Gandalf has that, right? So I absolutely do not want Galadriel in the kinslaying to be all like, no, everyone put down their arms. This is wrong, right? Like I'm not saying nobody does that. Finarfin does that, but not Galadriel. I don't want Galadriel to be, I want Galadriel to be feisty. I want Galadriel to be impetuous. Especially at this stage in her life, she should be making boneheaded choices. I'm cool with boneheaded choices. I want her to have. I think that because she knows she's great. She is smarter than most people. She's more powerful than most people, and she knows it, even though she doesn't get the respect because she is in the youngest generation of the elves involved here, and B, a girl, right? So, you know, but she knows her own worth, and she wants to prove her own worth. So I absolutely don't want her to be like, I shall do harm to none, and I am the only one who sees that this is all terrible. Anyway, so that's my rant about Galadriel and why I want Galadriel to do stuff wrong, and why I'm okay with her. Now, again, do I want her like slavering for the blood of the Teleri, you know, and like licking their blood off her weapons? No, I don't want that. But do I think that it's... Because first of all, think about the charge, right? She participates in the charge to the bridge. I am not sure that any of them... I think there should be this moment where, as they're charging to the bridge, like they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they're charging with weapons out, being like, we're coming to slaughter you, right? It's much less certain than that. All they see the Teleri shooting the Noldor, right, on the ships, and they think this is a setup. They think this is a trap, right? They think that the Fëanorians have been set up by the Teleri, and that the Teleri have been assigned to slaughter them. That's how it looks to them. So they're rushing up with just the only thought in their head being, this must stop, right? And then again, it's going to escalate, just as the Teleri go out to the ships to fight with the Fëanorians, not with the intention of killing them, but with this saying like, this, you must not do this. You must stop doing this. And it ends up escalating and coming to blows and people getting killed. And I think that's what's going to happen with Fingolfin too. So again, I'm not saying that, not only am I not saying that Galadriel is charging with a bared weapon screaming for the blood of her kin, none of them are doing that. Fingolfin's not going to do that either, right? They're just rushing forward. I think they're all rushing forward barehanded, right? And they don't know what's going to, and then when they get up there, then fighting begins and weapons are drawn and people are killed. And I think Galadriel stops before that happens. I'm fine with that. I don't need her to shed blood. I don't need her to even engage in fighting. But I don't see why she should not charge, right? She should not be trying to stop what's happening. Goodness, even her own empathy for the Teleri should make her want them to stop, right? I mean, why are you shedding the blood of your kin? Stop it, right? I'll physically restrain you from doing that if I have to, right? Why need there be anything else in her mind? And that's the whole point of the, and then of course, but then they, remember we said that they turn their arrows on them. And so some of the Noldor, including Fingolfin's sister, right, are killed before they even get up there, right? So again, like the misunderstanding of the situation on both sides, it's what could make the kinslaying so tragic, right? And not just tragic in the sense of sad stuff happens and lots of people die. That's cheap tragedy, right? But real tragedy, where none of them are really in the wrong except Feanor. None of them are really in the wrong. None of them are intending to do anything horrible, but bad stuff just keeps happening because it looks really bad, and they draw logical, sensible, understandable, but incorrect conclusions based on what they're seeing, and the next thing you know, people are dying. So anyway, this is why that is my defense. That is my defense of Galadriel charging the bridge. I could be convinced. I'm going to be very hard to convince that she's just going to stand aside, because I don't want sanctimonious, stainless Galadriel. I think that stainless Galadriel is not only an uninteresting story, I think it's an un-Tolkien story. And again, I would say that to Tolkien's face about his version of the later Galadriel. So yeah, that's my rant about Galadriel. I wasn't planning a rant, but there it was. What do you think, Dave? I've not let you get a word in edgewise for like 15 minutes now.
I mostly agree with that.
Mostly agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been summarizing your arguments on Twitter.
Okay. That's good. Well, yeah.
No, I agree. I think the main thing, my primary concern is to make sure that the story arc ends. So when Tolkien was doing his Galadriel 3.0 sort of kind of pass or retcon,
yeah,
I feel like that was with the mind of maybe revising the Lord of the Rings in some way, because I don't think Galadriel 3.0 is especially like the Galadriel 3.0 story, at least as far as I recall, doesn't provide a satisfactory explanation for Galadriel's sort of comments at the end of the encounter with Frodo at the Mere, right? The sort of
yes.
I passed the test. I will diminish, go into the West, right? Like that doesn't. There's no explanation for what tests. Why did she have to pass a test to earn her way back into And maybe we're reading between the lines a little bit there, but like the implication is she had to pass that test to return. Why did she? If she's if she's blameless, why did she have to pass the test? So I want to make sure whatever story we do provides some justification for that. Now, sort of the one of the comments that was made in the questions was, well, she doesn't have to be guilty of the kinslaying to be guilty, right? Can be guilty of rebellion. Here's the thing, though, like, if we want to show this on screen in a way that makes sense, if we want to leave the viewers with a sense that she's guilty, and that and build up a story where there's some reason why she can't return. She's not ready to go, but she's banned from Valinor. She can't go back. There has to be some lingering. There have to be some things on screen, some very clear things that the audience can remember, have burned into their brains of Galadriel did this and Galadriel did that, and hence she doesn't feel like she has the right to return, or she still feels like her redemption isn't finished. So does it have to be the kinslaying? No, but being an active participant in that, if not one of the main perpetrators, still having some blood on her hands is a convenient way to portray that. So that's all I'm looking for. I agree. I don't like the idea of her being. So here's the thing: if we decide, well, we don't want her to be a participant in this, but we still want her to be guilty. So what we'll do is we'll play up her role in instigating the rebellion. The thing is that it's just going to seem really weird and conflicting. If on the one hand she's going, let's get out of here, let's stop listening to the Valar, let's head to Middle Earth and win dominion over things. And then the next thing you know, she's running around encouraging everyone to put their weapons down and make peace. And it's sort of a weird oscillating character.
Yes.
I'd rather see her be much closer to Feanor at this point,
yes,
than she is toward the end, so that we have a story arc that we can tell, so that she actually has character development over the next 2,000 years.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, her weakness is desire for rule and dominion. Like all very powerful, very capable characters, the temptation is to carve out a large scope for their talents, right? To make sure that their talents are appreciated and given full scope. That's the temptation, right? She wants to rule realms. This is why declining the ring, right? Resisting the ring is going to be the capstone of her repentance, right? Because it is her turning away from the thing that she has most wanted. She wants power. And I like differentiating her in this sense, even from her own siblings. And remember, she's the one from whom Melian learns something, right? Remember those conversations between Melian and Galadriel about what happened with the Noldor and why they came and her resistance to telling her and everything? Come on, that's going to be so much more interesting. Yeah. Anyway, so like I said, I'm not saying that she has to be like bathed to her elbows, in the blood of her kin. She doesn't even have to strike a physical blow. I don't care if she strikes a physical blow. But I think that her making an overconfident, presumptuous choice, the kind of overconfident, presumptuous, wrong decisions and interpretations that people are doing on both sides of this conflict, that strikes me as a very Galadriel type of, like, she's proud and overconfident. That's part of her problem, right? So yeah, I think it's.
I don't know how doable this is, but maybe there's a way to present her as not an instigator or one of the main perpetrators of the violence, or not a bloodthirsty warmonger or whatever, but then nonetheless to somehow, whatever her role in the battle is, make sure that it's consistent with this idea of Galadriel as sort of a person who wants to have her way.
Yeah.
Who wants to rule in matters with which she is concerned. She wants her will to prevail. Mm-hmm. So however you want to portray that in this battle, I think I'm not particularly fussed. Just make sure that it's not Galadriel running around as a peacenik, but rather it's Galadriel running around trying to order things as she will, right? Like that, because I think you're right. I think that's what we want to zero in on as her primary flaw, which is her her pride and her desire to rule. And so let's just make sure that whatever her role in the battle is, it's consistent with that. Even if it's her running around trying to stop the fighting. Don't have it if you. So that would be something I'd be fine with. If we decide that on screen we want her to be trying to, doing something that looks like the right thing. But if that's true, then have her be doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yes, and very clearly for the wrong reasons. Yeah. I don't want Galadriel to come off well in this episode. I think that would be a disaster, not a disaster. I think that would be a mistake. People are predisposed to think well of Galadriel, right? She's the familiar character. Everybody is going to come with Aragorn and Gimli's perspective on Galadriel already in their heads, right? They're not going to need to be encouraged to look at Galadriel as a good guy. I think that we need to show her screwing up. She needs to do stuff not only which is unwise, but which is stuff that she is going to be ashamed of in retrospect and have to deal with that shame. Because that's, of course, another big question. It's another thing that separates good guys from bad guys, is not that the good guys never do anything wrong, but how they handle it afterwards, right? Thinking about the shame and the anger of the shame, a favorite phrase of mine. If feeling shame for your own actions leads you to sort of submerge that in anger, and in anger against others, that's a bad reaction to doing something wrong. So yeah, I this is why I don't think. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Dave. That if we want to show her like kind of taking charge and taking command and trying to sort of wield dominion in a sense, we could show her trying to do the right thing for the wrong reasons and trying to stop the fighting and kind of seize control. But honestly, I kind of feel like in the moment it's still just going to look like her trying to do the right thing while everybody else is doing the wrong thing. I'm not convinced enough that we could convey that powerfully enough. I think we need to show her screwing up.
Sure.
So yeah, I that's why I would like her to. I felt I was compromising already with people's sensibilities by not having her actually strike a blow against the Teleri. I think she totally could strike a blow against the Teleri. Yeah. I mean, imagine how powerful it would be. I would like a visual picture of Galadriel with blood, physically with blood on her. She doesn't have to shed it, right? But, maybe it's just like from a body that she has knelt next to. But I would like to Galadriel with blood on her clothes or blood on her hands, even literally blood on her hands, right? Or on her face or something. Because I would love to have that visual image, something we can juxtapose against Aragorn's statement on the Lady of Lorien, there is no stain, right? Having her have the ability to flash back to the time when she was literally stained with the blood of her kin. And it shouldn't sound ironic. It shouldn't undermine it, right? This is not to say that Aragorn is a dupe for saying that. Again, it's the memory of the things that she has done wrong at the end of her arc, which of course that moment is, right? We're coming up to the very end of her arc when she's going to resist the ring. As we're coming up to that, and she triumphantly does the right thing and repent and is redeemed and this is not a sudden thing, right? She's been making that decision. She's been moving in that direction. The memory of the thing that she did wrong is no longer the cause of grief and shame. There's a kind of glory to that, right? There's a kind of glory to the memory of the thing that she did wrong after she's repented, after she's turned away from it, knowing how badly she could have gone wrong, knowing that could have been the beginning of a really, really bad trajectory, right? But she didn't go on that trajectory, and she's repented. Anyway, I'm thinking this. Brianna says, am I making a request? Yes, I am making a request. If it's possible, if you can see your way clear to doing it, I would like to have a blood-stained Galadriel picture, if we can, somewhere here in that episode. But as you can see what little provocation it takes for me to take a third episode talking about the kinslaying. Let's talk about episode 5 before we entirely run out of time here today. Are you cool with that, Dave?
Yes, I might as well.
All right, let's do that. Okay. So, to my questions from last time. Do we revisit the Noldor? A general thought was that it seems unnecessary. And in a sense, that is kind of an answer to my question. My question was, is it going to be necessary? Are we going to have enough in this episode to really fill an episode? My concern looking at the outline is that this episode, episode 5, and the next episode, episode 6, seem a little thin. That is to say, at least based on our outline, it's not obvious what we're going to accomplish exactly in these episodes. So that was the primary reason I asked, do we want to revisit the Noldor, is do we need to revisit the Noldor? Are we going to want that in order to make sure that the episode is sort of full and complex enough? Yeah. Anyway, okay, so I agree with that. Now, I think it's interesting, the suggestion that if we did have one, we could have Fingolfin breaking his sword here. I agree that that's a good suggestion. My primary impulse is to say, okay, I'm willing to agree that it seems unnecessary. I think it would be good to have this as a possibility, but I do kind of like this as a culmination, though, of we had this scene, the confrontation between Fingolfin and Feanor after the kinslaying, as essentially the sort of the culmination, the end point of the Noldor arc at the beginning of the season. The Noldor departure from Valinor arc. So I think that's fine. Dave, do you have strong thoughts about this?
I'm inclined to omit it.
Okay. Yeah.
I like her. For some reason, it becomes clear we need it. For some reason, then I think the suggestion of doing Fingolfin and Feanor is a reasonable compromise.
Yes. Okay. Angband storyline. So what's going on in Angband? So we've had skirmishes, but not full-scale battles. We need to have elves fleeing from the north. I'd rather not have elves in the north at all, frankly. The only place we really need there to be Sindar in the north is Nevrast, if we want to have the people of Gondolin be a mixture of Noldor and Sindar, as is described in the Silmarillion. Nevrast is the one place where they're described, under Turgon is the one place where, it's described the two of them really kind of coming together and forming a united kingdom there. But Nevrast is, geographically removed from everything that's going on, so I don't even think we need to deal with that. We could have a few... One of the things that I was thinking here, pre-Menegroth, I think we want to have the elves scattered much more, not really living in any concentrated place. And so therefore, I think we could have, within this episode, we had the first encounter with the orcs before, and then we had the encounter with the dwarves and more serious concerns about the orcs. I think that the pressure from the orcs is going to increase in this episode. The elves, so that there would be some elves who had been wandering / living, whatever elves do, not necessarily living in a permanent place, but kind of wandering around and enjoying Beleriand. Some of them would have been up in the north and would be running and bringing horror stories about what orcs had done, to their families or whatever up there. I think, I think that would be, that would be good. That would be a good way to convey that orc activity is increasing without having to show lots of unnecessary orc battles and additional sort of, spending a lot of time on troop movements and that kind of thing. So that would be a good way to convey that, I think. I had asked about Bulldog and what is sort of the point of Bulldog and how does he distinguish himself. I think Bulldog is... My thoughts about Bulldog, I agree about the brutal discipline and stuff, and the disciplined army. That, I think, is Bulldog's job. The orcs, I think, are... the orcs are naturally unruly, right? They're naturally just inclined to fly. Orcs left to themselves are always going about individually or in small groups and just like hunting and raiding and wrecking stuff. Like, orcs don't naturally form an army. They don't naturally follow orders. This is kind of the downside of the, ferocity, rage, and hatred with which Morgoth has invested them upon his return to Middle-earth. So, so what Bulldog's job is basically to take the orcs, which are potent potentially as a fighting force, but entirely undisciplined and not working together as a large group. And his job is to come in, beat them into line, right? He is less a general than a captain, in a sense, I think, if you see what I mean by that. He's the one who is an immediate... He's more like a centurion, than a general. He's the one who keeps everybody in line, literally in line, possibly. But he's the one who forms them into it. So that's how Sauron uses him, right? Sauron doesn't want to command the orcs. First of all, remember, I think he's going to find the orcs distasteful because this was not his vision for the orcs. What Morgoth did to the orcs is still kind of a grievance of Sauron's, right? So he's not going to love orcs and the whole way that orcs have gone at this point, anyway. And that's going to notice the scope for how this is going to, again, Sauron's overarching storyline, right? Later on, of course, Sauron is going to be doing the same thing. Sauron is going to be happy for orcs to be the way that they are, but he's not there yet, right? It's going to be sort of a sign of his decline as Morgoth is declining. When Sauron comes to like orcs, then that he's taken another significant step down that path to the void. So Tony, exactly. Have Bulldog foreshadowing orc leaders like Azog and the Great Goblin. Absolutely. That's exactly where I see Bulldog as like the greatest Great Goblin, essentially. That's his job. That's his role. And indeed, Tony, I would literally even think that those great orc captains and generals that we see later on could be literally descendants of Bulldog. They could be his distant offspring, essentially. And we could mention that, like when Bolg shows up at the Battle of Five Armies, there could be, a memory of Bulldog. But anyway, Brianna, essentially, we kind of mentioned, I think, something like that before, but yeah, Brianna says Sauron wanted Dungeons and Dragons Dark Elves, but he got orcs instead. Yeah, that's essentially it. He was trying to make drow, and instead he gets orcs. I don't think that Bulldog could be the Great Goblin, Mike, but we could make him... Did we decide, when's Bulldog gonna die? When and how is Bulldog gonna... we can always kill him off in the War of Wrath, but that seems a shame. Because, so many other things are gonna get killed in the War of Wrath. Gondolin? Yeah, we can make him die in Gondolin. Somebody's got to kill him, though. If he's gonna die, it needs to be a big...
I think Fingolfin should kill him.
Fingolfin could kill him. When, though?
He should get a victory.
Battle of Sudden Flames?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. What if Sudden Flames or Unnumbered Tears?
Tony and David are both suggesting maybe during the Siege of Nargothrond, Turin could kill him. But I wouldn't want Bulldog to be there. I think that Glaurung wouldn't want Bulldog because Glaurung is in control of the orcs himself. So I don't think that Bulldog and Glaurung would play nicely together. So that's why I would argue against Nargothrond. Hurin and the Fens of Serek. He could kill Bulldog as part of the rearguard action. Yeah, Nick was just thinking the same thing. Yeah. That would be cool. That would be a worthy death for Bulldog. Ooh, Marie, that's a really good suggestion too. What if it's Bulldog who kills Barahir and the rest of the guy? Remember the orc who's holding the hand of Barahir with the ring still on it, right? And considering keeping the ring for himself. What if that's Bulldog and then Baron comes in and kills him? I like that. The only problem is it's a small squad of orcs, right? And Bulldog specializes in armies. Yeah. Oh, Rickle is recalling that I had suggested that he be killed by Glamdring, by someone wielding Glamdring, the sword Glamdring, so as to get the parallel with the Great Goblin. Yeah, that's very clever. But it would have to be Gondolin then, and I'm not sure. I like the Hurin idea. Yeah, I think that killing Bulldog at the end of the Battle of Unnumbered Tears would be. I think that's my favorite way for him to die if he dies in the First Age. Because remember, he's not totally mortal, right? So Bulldog could stick around for a long time. We could keep him. He could escape the First Age if we wanted him to. Because remember, Sauron is going to be fresh out of lieutenants in the Second Age. I mean, I guess that's why he makes his own, right, with the ring wraiths. So that's fine. Yeah, if we keep him to the Second Age, he'd be dead weight. He's too much for the Second Age. We really want the emphasis to be on Sauron developing his own thing with the Rings of Power, primarily, in the Second Age.
That's why I think we need to pick a glorious way for him to go out and battle.
Clearly.
First.
Yeah. Well, Hurin, because see, what a way
I like
to...
the Hurin suggestion.
Yeah, what a way to emphasize the heroism of the Fens of Serek, right? Of the odds stacked against them. If Hurin and Huor and the men of Dorloman are standing not just against a whole big bunch of people, but against Bulldog himself leading the armies of the orcs in pursuit of the Gondolindrim. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Yeah, we could... we have lots of time to change our mind about that, but I kind of like it. Anyway, okay. So Bulldog is brutal, ruthless, merciless, and he's the one who gets but his job is to get all the orcs going in the same direction, right? Out of personal fear of him, primarily. He, like Ugluk, is not afraid to knock off a few heads in order to make the rest of them fall into line. So, yeah. Okay. We should show Bulldog being deputed to lead the armies here. So we need to introduce Bulldog, not introduce him, we've already introduced him, I think, but we need to bring him in, have him working with Sauron, and show an army marching. Because we need to get ready. I mean, things are about to get real down in South Beleriand. Things are gonna be troubled soon. So we want to show this is more than just there are orcs in the world and orcs are a problem wherever you meet them. That we've established with their first meeting of the orcs with Beleg. We set up, exactly, Nick, we set up the eastern arm of the southern campaign. Bulldog is told, get a whole bunch of orcs, get them all in a unit, and get them marching south and destroy, all the elves that find as many elves as you can and destroy them, essentially. Will be like the orders that Bulldog will receive over there. So I think that all works pretty well. I like that. The more I think about this, the more I like the idea of Hurin killing Bulldog. I think that's cool. The Glamdring idea is fun, but this is better. This is way better. Okay. Sauron and Shelob meet. So we had talked about Thuringwethil scouting out this, finding A, that Ungoliant is gone into the south, B, that she's had a whole mess of offspring, right? So there are a bunch of giant spiders, and sort of working to kind of set up a meeting. So we have Sauron come with Thuringwethil down into wherever it is that the spiders are, which is presumably, where is it? Where do the spiders live? I mean, I know where the spiders live in the Silmarillion. Hang on, let's return to the map here for a second. Okay. Marie, it's so useful to have the map be the first slide, so we can always use it as a prop when we need to here. This, of course, right up here, north of Doriath, is Ered Gorgoroth. This is where the spiders are eventually going to live. But, of course, this works really well as the place to which the spiders retreated after the Girdle of Melian comes into play. So, remember, we're planning to do that. We're planning to have Melian deploy the Girdle primarily as an as a spider repulsion device. At least that's its immediate purpose, right, as the spiders are coming in to take over Doriath. So when the Girdle of Melian is deployed, the spiders flee, and they flee to the north, and that's how they end up in Ered Gorgoroth. That seems to me to work really, really well. So where were they originally? Where were the spiders living? Were they living maybe down here in this southern forest? Is that where the spiders were living, perhaps? I think they should be living in the south because that's where Ungoliant, she fled down to the south. So I think that's where so I mean, I guess we could have the spiders just living here already, but I kind of like the idea of Sauron recruiting, like actively recruiting them, like come up here and join with us, and yeah. I mean, we could have them over. We could have them nearer by. Let me see. Why is it that I want them to be far away and nobody else wants them to be far away? The reason I want them to be far away is that I want their involvement in the conflict to be Sauron's initiative, clearly Sauron's initiative. I want the importing of the spiders, because if the spiders are next door neighbors to the elves anyway, then they would already have been a threat. And what's more, the elves would know about them. Presumably, right? They would have encountered them before, and they would be like, hey, watch out. There are these freakish giant spiders, nearby, so that when they attack, to be like, oh, the neighborhood freaky giant spiders are attacking. Isn't that inconvenient? I think that it's, I think that that's less cool than them coming out of nowhere and the elves being like, what, monstrosity is this? So I like that as a tactic. Hakan says it would add boring logistics. Well, how come we don't have to do boring logistics? Like, we don't have to have. Remember the scene in the Peter Jackson film, right, where Faramir and his lieutenant have like the map, and they're pointing to the map, right, to help everybody. It's like, and it's exposition time with help of a map, right? I'm not saying we do that with Sauron and Shelob, right? It doesn't matter exactly where they are. In the film, we're not going to, in the actual show, we're not going to talk about it exactly. Nor do we have to be like, and let us like contemplate like the transportation of the spiders and like their supply lines and stuff. We don't have to do any of that stuff. The point is just the spiders are far away. Nobody else knows about them except Thuringwethil because she found them, and Sauron is gonna, even Sauron knows them, or even Morgoth knows them not, right? And so Sauron is the one who finds, so they're his stratagem, right? And all we need is a scene with him and the spiders. He goes down to visit the spiders and he talks to Shelob and he's like, come up and this is going to be awesome and you will get, and so we have like a little miniature Ungoliant Morgoth deal, right? Where he's like, I will, we will reward you. You will receive rich spoils if you come and help us. And the spiders are like, okay, cool. And that's it. Then we don't see them again until they invade Doriath, right? So like, why do we need any more logistics than that? It's fine. They can travel. So their meetings. So, but I want to know. Yes, I know we're not going to show it in the show, but I want to know where they are, right? So that's why I'm wanting to find it, and I want it to be further away. That's why I don't want it up here, because it's not realistic to me. Remember, the Falas is where the hang on, this map is kind of washed out. Out here, right? Yes, over here is where Círdan is, right? So there is no chance that the Sindar will have been all over this area. Again, I don't think the Sindar are living much in Hithlum or Taurnafuin necessarily, but they're primarily around over here. They would have encountered the spiders. I don't want the spiders to be old news, right? So, yeah.
This to me seems like an excellent opportunity to indulge in geography.
Absolutely, yes. Of Beleriand, its realms, and the spiders that live therein.
Yes.
Well, Nick, no, I don't think it's... Okay, so Nick is saying that someone's going to make an accusation, the same accusation that I made about Radagast showing up in Rhudaur. No, because time passes. This is not... Like, they can take some time to travel. It's not going to happen right away. There's going to be a few episodes, right, before the spiders come in and attack. So I'm not too worried about that. Yeah. Sure, we can consider how long it would take them to get there, but spiders are pretty quick. Giant spiders are even quicker, and they've got at least months, weeks. Why not? Right? Again, the problem in the Hobbit films is that we're like cutting from one thing to another, and the implication is that not much time is passing. I mean, as far as there are active cues that little time has passed, and in a time which in a period of time which the film is actually asking us to accept is only a couple of days, they're traveling, hundreds and hundreds of miles by bunny sled. I don't think that's a big deal. Nick is saying what about Sauron and Thuringwethil here in this episode? But they're flying, right? They can both fly, Sauron and Thuringwethil. That bunny sleds don't fly, but gigantic bats do. And we know that Sauron will take a vampire form later on as well. So Sauron and Thuringwethil can fly, and that makes for a difference, doesn't it? And also remember, we've had time. The fact that we have Thuringwethil come back, and she's been gone for goodness knows how long, and she comes back and reports, and Sauron's like, okay, that's a great idea. Then in this episode, we see them arrive. We don't know how much time has passed. We're still at a period in the season where, it's not like the stuff that's happening now is the next day from the previous episode, right? So yeah. Hakan, I know that in the published Silmarillion, Ungoliant bred where Nan Dungortheb is. I know. It's a change. I know it's a change. But that's okay, right? As long as there's a good reason, and that reason fits within like the overall spirit of the thing, there's no reason we can't make changes, because we're telling a different story. And it's fine. Yeah, we're getting them to where they're supposed to be in the end, Marie, exactly. We will make Nungortheb into a land of horror. But honestly, this is one of the things. One of the things that we're doing with the Silmarillion especially, this I think will come in less when we're retelling stories like The Lord of the Rings, right? In The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien comes down really close to the ground. Right. He is very concerned not only with things like what are the characters thinking and why are they doing all the things that they're doing, but he's also concerned about things like what is the phase of the moon and, what day is it and all that kind of thing. Those questions don't generally get asked in the Silmarillion. Right. And what I find, this has been an interesting consequence of reading through the Return of the Shadow and the Treason of Isengard in the Mythgard Academy classes that we've been doing, which we just finished the Treason of Isengard the day before yesterday. One of the interesting consequences of that is that you see, watching Tolkien's own process, right? When he first did, for instance, his very first pass at, which was pretty much an outline form, his very first pass at Frodo getting to Mount Doom in Mordor. When he first takes Frodo into Mordor in his outlines, he pays almost no attention to geography, to how much time it's going to take you to travel. He doesn't think that way at first. He's just thinking big picture, right, of the story. So he has what is, in its a frankly unrealistic narrative, right? He has Frodo on the way to Mount Doom, and he has Gollum betraying them. He's not betraying them to the spiders. He's betraying them at first, in that first pass, he's betraying them to the ringwraiths, right? So you have Gollum running like from the foot of Mount Doom to where the ringwraiths are going out to battle the men of Gondor, or Ondor, of course, as it still is at that point. And then running back, right, in like a couple hours, right? Because again, it's not about the geography. He barely has the map worked out in his head at that point. Tolkien instead is just, it's concepts, right? He's thinking about concepts. He's thinking about the big picture story. Well, in the Silmarillion, we get a lot of that kind of thing. We get a lot of like big picture story. And I am pretty convinced that if Tolkien had ever done much closer views of things, right? If he had gone down and told the story more like the narrative of The Lord of the Ring, he'd have made a lot of changes himself to what he did, to what is in the published Silmarillion. Hakan, here's my reason. I do think there's a reason not to have the spiders there. The reason not to have the spiders there is I want them to be a surprise. I want them to be a surprise. I want them to be a surprise, not to the readers, to the viewers, to the elves. I want them to be a surprise to the elves. Look at the map. Look at the map. Menegroth is here. Dungortheb is here, right? After the girdle is in place around Doriath, it makes all kinds of sense that Dungortheb and Ered Gorgoroth, just to the north of Doriath, would become this no man's land of like freakiness, which is haunted by giant spiders because it's outside the girdle. And the elves of Doriath don't go there, and they're not really concerned with it very much because it's outside the girdle. In pre-girdle days, the Sindar are going to be all around here, certainly in the adjacent places to Doriath. So there would be an issue, right? How could we not incorporate that in the story before? Why haven't we already had them talking about, like, okay, anybody else concerned about the giant spider problem? We seem to have a major infestation just to the north of us here. Is everybody okay with that, right? Should we maybe do something about the giant spiders, like the offspring of Ungoliant seem like bad neighbors, right? Do we think we could possibly we could possibly increase our property values here by getting rid of the giant spiders that live just to the north of us? So it's much better if they're not there. We want Doriath, I want Beleriand to be this little Beleriandic paradise before the orcs come in, before Sauron starts messing with it, right? So I want the spiders to be not only a brilliant stratagem on Sauron's part and a shocking surprise to the elves, but I want this to be, like, I don't want any part of Beleriand infested and nasty and evil already. So that's my reason why. And again, it's the kind of thing that I actually think is in the category. I'm not saying that Tolkien, I know that if Tolkien had done this, he would have made that change too. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying it's the kind of change that Tolkien does make when he goes from telling big epic story, big picture, synopsis, plot summary version story, down to more novelistic narrative. Yeah. Okay. Anyway. Whew. Yeah, as Tony says, Tolkien first thinks plot, then character, then theme, then logistics. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that seems fair. I'm not sure. No, you're right. Actually, Tony, I was going to quibble with your putting character before theme, but I think you're right, actually. Certainly, Tony, the evidence that we saw on Wednesday about how the Return of the King theme in The Lord of the Rings certainly seems to come after the character developments with Aragorn and be instigated by the character developments of Aragorn. Right? It's like Aragorn's got to find a girlfriend first before he becomes the king, right? And his finding a girlfriend leads him to being the king in part. Anyway, okay. Could they live under arid... Sorry, what?
I said story grows in the telling.
And the story grows in the telling, absolutely. Håkon says, could they live under the arid Luin? Well, no, because then they're in the dwarves' front yard. Right, and then the dwarves would be all over them, or they'd be all over the dwarves, and it would become a talking point, right? Presumably, if the spiders were living over here, by the arid Luin, then you'd think that would be an issue for the dwarves, and that the dwarves would bring it up like, hey, let's make an alliance with the elves. Hey, you guys, could you help us with our spider problem? Again, you'd think it'd come up, right? So, yes, they could be up here theoretically. I mean, okay. It's my problem with making them up here is that's not the path of Ungoliant. She goes south, right? But maybe, whatever. I have no objection to that. If you want to make them up here, it could at least make the distance that Sauron and Thorin have to cross smaller. So I'm fine with it. They don't have to be in the extreme south. It's all good. If you want to make them up here, I'm comfortable with that. Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm going to go back because this makes it look like we haven't started again. And we totally did. What do the spiders want? What do they get out of this? I said we should kind of, in a sense, sort of recapitulate the Ungoliant, or kind of recall the Ungoliant-Morgoth exchange. What do they offer? What does Shelob want? A glut of life, she wants, right? So she doesn't eat light. She doesn't eat gems. She just drinks blood, right? So actually, Håkon, I like it. If they're living up in the arid Luin, that's even better, right? If the spiders are living in what is a kind of a barren, lifeless place, especially after they've been living there for a while, right? Then not only the elves themselves, but even the forest itself, right? Sauron could say, come and I will show you this forest that is teeming with life, whose life you will be able to feed on and suck dry for centuries. So that we have the juxtaposition of the horrible, barren desolation that the spiders live in and the rich, fertile, toothsome loveliness of Doriath. Yep, that works. Okay, Håkon, you've convinced me. They shouldn't live in a forest. They should live in particularly barren and forbidding mountains. Like it. Okay. Hey, let's keep going. Petty dwarves. What are the petty dwarves? So I like this idea that the petty dwarves are exiled dwarves from the various clans. I do think having the petty dwarves are clearly a problem. Right? I would say the petty dwarves are on my short list of stuff that's not really smoothed out very clearly in the published Silmarillion, right? The petty dwarves, I think, are a bit of a blemish in the published Silmarillion. This is one of those things that Tolkien hadn't fully ironed out before he died. Because, essentially, the petty dwarves are the original dwarves. Before he made the dwarves better and more heroic, the dwarves were much much nastier, and Meme, of course, is the father of all dwarves. Meme was Durin, right? Meme was the father of all dwarves back in the Book of Lost Tales. He was Meme, the deathless and ageless. So you had basically in the Silmarillion, you have these stories which incorporate the newer, post-Hobbit, post-Lord of the Rings, more heroic dwarves, like Azahal, especially, in his heroic role in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. And then you have the, nastier, more menial dwarves, or not menial, venial, that's the word I was looking for. More venial dwarves represented by Meme and the role that they play in the story of Turin. And they were just basically Tolkien's old dwarves, that played this different role in this different story. And instead of changing Meme, and making Meme more like, Gimli, instead he just is like, well, these dwarves are different, right? and it's not really I feel like you can still kind of see the seams there. So
does that mean that Bilbo is either confusing his different kinds of dwarves, or was Bilbo trading in old dwarf stereotypes?
Well, see, that's the thing, is that when The Hobbit was written, Bilbo's stereotypes were perfectly justified. I mean, Bilbo was right. The Thorin and company are the old kind of dwarves. They're the old kind of dwarves who rise above it at the end, right? But remember, dwarves are not heroes, right? That's that's what The Hobbit tells us, right? Except, of course, they become heroes at the end. And by the time we get to the Lord of the Rings, we've decided they're definitely more heroic. But anyway, whatever. I don't want to get bogged down in that. The point is, I like the idea of saying the petty dwarves are outcasts. So there are some wandering dwarves in Beleriand from whom, Meme will be descended, perhaps, who are exiles from their and they could be a mixture of various dwarf clans. They have no clan, and those who are clanless can be kind of so I think that's great. I think that's cool. I have an idea in particular. What if the petty dwarves are like peddlers, basically? Make them, like peddlers and tinkers, rather than great craftsmen and, merchants with large mercantile networks. They could have been maybe criminals. I don't even know. Why do you think they were outlawed? I mean, do you think they were outlawed for good reasons or for bad reasons? Are they victims or are they not victims? They think themselves victims, certainly. Do we actually want to make them bad, or do we want to make them ill done by? Well, on the one hand,
what about some? Is there some way to have our cake and eat it too? So both.
Often there is, right? Let's see. If we make the dwarves hang on, I'm pausing for a second because I'm thinking to myself, what do we need the petty dwarves for? Meme. Is there anything else? Apart from Meme, are we ever going to want the petty dwarves again? Do we see including the petty dwarves into other stories other than Turin Turambar's stories?
Which dwarves do we want to have it be that murder a Thingol? I mean, I think that's not petty dwarves.
No.
But that's an uncharitable thing those dwarves do. So if we would like there to be untrammeled heroic dwarves, we could always foist that off on petty dwarves.
Well, no, because it's the dwarves in the Silmarillion. It's the dwarves of Nogrod who kill Thingol and have the war with Doriath, and I'm still fine with that. I would rather it be with one of the big dwarf houses that happens. And we were kind of setting up the dwarf, the Firebeards for that one anyway last time, thinking about the Nauglamir and everything and the jewelers and all that kind of stuff. I think that Azakal of Belegast, I like the idea of Azakal of Belegast being, and you guys were suggesting this on the discussion boards this week, be like awesome. He is like the heroic, the coolest, best, most upstanding, most honorable, most valiant of all of the dwarves. I love that. And the dwarves of Belegast can be great folks. In fact, I would even kind of be interested in the idea that Eol goes to study with the elves of Belegast and the dwarves of Belegast rather, and the dwarves of Belegast get like increasingly uncomfortable with Eol, right? But anyway. Yeah, Chris suggests that petty dwarves could align themselves with Morgoth and fight in some of the battles. Yeah, they could.
So maybe if we go that route,
Yeah.
maybe petty dwarves are simply evil dwarves, or even like what if petty dwarves are like the orc version of dwarves, like dwarves that have been corrupted, and maybe they've just been less malleable to the actual sort of physical corruption.
You know,
and then maybe Meme becomes like a petty dwarf outcast. Like he's actually kind of like an okay guy who didn't want to be involved in Morgoth's business. He's on the run from Morgoth when Turin finds him, and that's why he's kind of sort of twitchy and hiding and things like that.
I don't know, it seems kind of ornate. I don't know. I'm not sure I like the corrupted dwarves idea. The corruption, I mean, like the making of the orcs, like that's such a big deal, that yeah, and as Nick is pointing out, that it does go against LA's work that they would be. Remember, the dwarves are supposed to be, they're not totally incorruptible in the sense of not susceptible to moral corruption is all, but they're strong to resist domination. So I don't think they can be twisted in the same way.
That's what I'm getting at, though, that they're a failed project.
Yeah,
where they've been kidnapped and attempted to be turned, and it really, really basically fails. But they aren't accepted back into dwarf society. The same way many of the sort of thralls that get released by Morgoth, have trouble reintegrating into elven society. So maybe they're a failed corruption project from Sauron or Morgoth or somebody.
Yeah.
But the result is you have these sort of embittered outcasts. It's just hard to sort of figure out how to get them to where we want, if we're going to go with they're outcasts from dwarven society. It's hard to figure out how exactly to get them there in a way that kind of makes sense.
We could never explain it. I mean, there could be the reason that they were outcast could be something that the dwarves refuse to talk about, just because they're generally secretive about inside things, right? So, like the leaders of the dwarves could be evasive on that question as to what exactly they did to be outlawed. But I'm thinking about the corruption project, though, or the failed corruption project. I'm thinking, see, they don't need to be corrupted to be embittered, though. If they're outcasts, they'd be embittered already. And if you've got this group of embittered dwarves who have already been outcast, they don't need to be corrupted. They only need to be recruited, basically. And that sounds like exactly the kind of thing that Sauron would do, wouldn't he? I mean, wouldn't Sauron, when Sauron became aware that there was this faction of the dwarves that were, outcast, isolated, and embittered, wouldn't his first impulse to be to come alongside them and be like, you have been done so wrong. Come, I will help you win back your own, right? I mean, that's obviously would be the first move that Sauron would make.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So we could show that.
We still return to the central dilemma of why are they outcast?
Yeah.
Are we saying we're punting? We're just not going to explain it. I don't know. There's something about the idea of like maybe they're outcast because they're, for good reason, because they were evil, jealous, whatever dwarves. I don't know. For some reason, that's not sitting right with me. It seems to.
I don't want them to be innately evil.
I prefer this to be a tragic element, like where they're outcast for not so great reasons, and then they end up turning to evil.
But at the same time, I don't want the dwarves who outcast them to be totally unsympathetic either.
Oh yeah, I know. That's the problem too, right? Like we don't want to.
If they're just a persecuted minority, right?
Yeah.
Then it really paints the dwarves of Belcost and Nokrod in a bad light. Okay, how about this? The dwarves are stone hard, right? So what about this? What if they are criminals, or rather their forefathers were criminals? So like if the sentence for certain crimes among the dwarves is banishment, perpetual banishment. You and your descendants are not allowed back. Like you are kicked out of the clan, and your descendants are never going to be let back into the clan. That is the, so you're going to be expunged from the clan. And that way, on the one hand, it's justified, they committed a crime, right? They did the deed, they're receiving the punishment, but the punishment is implacable. And the implacability of the punishment could be the petty dwarves, which we meet in Beleriand, are like the grandchildren of the criminals, right? And they themselves haven't done anything wrong, so they can feel and we can have sympathy for their feeling ill done by, like, why am I being outcast for something my great grandfather did? And so we can show the dwarves of the Blue Mountains as being somewhat too implacable in their penalties against the petty dwarves, and yet not have it be totally arbitrary or merely discriminatory. Now Chris Graham is asking us to say, why did Tolkien call them petty dwarves? Like, why petty? Honestly, I don't think that petty meant to Tolkien what it means to us necessarily. I think that it means lesser. Like, it's like they're the lesser. There's like the great dwarves and the lesser dwarves. A couple people are suggesting something like a dwarven caste system. I hear that. That's a possibility. I'm not a big fan. Mostly because I'm not a big fan of caste systems, and I think that's gonna create an obstacle that's gonna be hard to overcome later on. If we establish the petty dwarves as merely a lower social caste who are despised by their superiors, what are we going to do with Gimli later on? Is he just a high caste dwarf, and we're supposed to expect that, it's okay if he despises other? I mean, it's going to complicate things later on. I'm not a big fan. Mariel, it would really impair our ability to portray the dwarves as anything other than prejudiced and wicked. Because for better or worse, it's impossible in the modern era to depict somebody as living in unapologetic prejudice and stereotype without being wicked. Like, that is wickedness in the modern world. Like, that's worse than cruelty. I have a hard time seeing how we're going to really overcome that obstacle. No, Chris, the hobbits, there are social classes among the hobbits, but that's very different from a caste system. Very different from a caste system. The difference between Frodo Baggins, Farmer Maggot, and Gaffer Gamgee is a class. Those are class differences, not caste differences. Yeah. Morally superior or inferior by birth is as horrific an idea as you can have. Certainly, that is certainly the consensus of the modern world. Yes. And of course, it's not always been the consensus, but it is certainly the consensus of the modern world. And I can't see a good reason for us to try to buck that, which I think we'd kind of have to, or be inconsistent with ourselves. So, I say we make them exiles, perpetual exiles, and so therefore their descendants are ill done by, but also rightly exiled. I think that's the best thing I can think of that kind of accomplishes both ends. And but we don't just have them an oppressed minority either. They do bad things. right? They will join with Sauron, and I think that we can. I don't see right away a role for them, but we could find one. Let's just keep that in our hat. There may come a time when we will want the petty dwarves before we get to Turin Turambar. I think that they could possibly play a role during season 4, for instance. They could play a significant role in the Battle of Sudden Flame, maybe. I don't know. Building up to that, we'll see. If we need them, we have them. If we don't, we can forget about them and then bring them back when it comes to meme. And we've set the stage. Okay. I don't think we need to make them physically differentiated because they're not a different race from the other dwarves. The thing that's different about them is that they are poor and they are mixed, right? Because there should be mixed broadbeams and firebeards and even a couple stray longbeards among them, I would suspect, perhaps. Okay, let's keep going. Because for some reason we're running short on time today.
So is the agreement that the petty dwarves are descendants of criminals?
Yes.
So the current generation is blameless. They're just embedded outcasts. But the original exile or whatever was justified.
Right. Exactly.
So that means that the dwarves the dwarves were right in making that original. So we retain sort of the heroic core of the dwarves, with maybe leaving them to be a little rigid and uncaring toward the current generation of outcasts.
Yes.
And then the current generation of dwarves are not inherently evil or corrupt. They're just they're in some sense victims. But then some of them, because of their bitterness, will be turned evil by Sauron.
Yes, exactly. That seems that seems to me to work.
Subtle, nuanced.
Exactly. Now,
tragic.
Yes. Now, Tony Mead is reminding us that Meme and his sons are supposed to be, they're like the last of the petty dwarves, right? So we need to kill them off. I agree. Let's kill them off. Let's kill them off in the battle. There's lots of places we could kill them off, right? We could kill them off in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. We need to build them up before that, though. We would need to. There needs to be a petty dwarf storyline where they get recruited by Sauron. Sauron would recruit them for a particular reason. Maybe they're supposed to. Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, anyway, we'll come back to it. We don't have to solve this right now. That's not an issue for season 3. But keep in mind, we will keep in mind that the petty dwarves are due to be recruited by Sauron at some point, probably in season 4. And let's leave it at that. We'll come up with something later on. Okay, kicking that can down the road. But this brings us to Menegroth, because the idea, what we in theory liked the idea that Menegroth was like the petty dwarves had settled in Menegroth and the other dwarves are going to kick them out of it. So that this is where the beginning Meme's complaint that the elves have come in and taken over the land and infringed upon the rights of the petty dwarves. This is kind of where that comes from, right? Or where that begins. And I think that's a really great idea. There are, and as well as the emphasis that you guys were making that it should be the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, not the elves, who kick the petty dwarves out of Menegroth. That seems to me very important. I can't imagine Thingol and Melian coming in and being like, this place looks good, except it's infested with these petty dwarves, right? Let's kick them the heck out and take it for ourselves. I have a really hard time having Melian do that. So having Menegroth be the gift of like the dwarves of Belagost, and so therefore having the dwarves of Belagost boot them out first. But actually, can we have the dwarves of Nogrod do it instead of the dwarves of Belagost? Because remember it's Thingol and the dwarves of Nogrod who are due for conflict later on, and if Menegroth itself was initially like, if the Firebeards themselves could represent Menegroth itself as not only saying dwarves helped you in building this, but we gave this to you, like we gave you Menegroth itself, that would be kind of cool, right? So I would love to have the dwarves of Nogrod be the sort of the primaries there. Anyway, though of course the dwarves of Belegost would be the ones that they'd primarily be recruiting to help them in the making of Menegroth, because they're the architects, right? They're the builders. Yeah. Tony, I was thinking a similar thing, by the way, that the petty dwarves could be turned against the other dwarves. I'm imagining Azakal and the dwarves of Belegost destroying most of the petty dwarves in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, possibly. Tony Mead is thinking of, the way Sauron using the petty dwarves against the rest of the dwarves in a similar way to how Saruman uses the Dunlendings against the Rohirrim. That makes sense to me. Anyway, yeah, so Mariel, exactly. That way Menegroth is a gift of both dwarven cities. The people of Nogrod are the ones who know about it, and they are the ones probably who kick the petty dwarves out of it, and they give it to Thingol, and then the dwarves of Belegost come and help them reconstruct it. So, David and I agree. That's the other thing I was thinking. It keeps Azakal a good guy, right? Then we don't have Azakal being the one who is like, okay, I'm going to clean this out of petty dwarves. We have the slightly more ruthless dwarves of Nogrod doing that. And then Azakal just coming in for the construction part, right? And being a positive help to the elves in that way. I have one problem. Want to hear my problem? My problem comes back to the map. Menegroth is here. Right here. To the north of the A in Doriath on the map, along the river. Practically in the smack middle of Doriath. How do the elves not know about it already? That's not too hard to solve because it's a cave and maybe they didn't know the entrance to this cave, and so that's not a huge deal. But much more importantly, B, how on earth can petty dwarves be settled there and the elves have not met them yet? Right? How can we arrange that? This is, to me, the big weakness of having there be petty dwarves living in Menegroth. I love the idea. Is they stay in the cave and don't come out. Sure, but how do they get in? When did they get in? Where did they come from? Yeah, Mariel, I'm thinking they would have to have tunneled in from a heck of a long ways away. I mean, but Mariel, we see the problem there, right? Too. Do we want to have a network of subterranean tunnels that extends all the way out past the girdle of Melian and goes right into, the wine cellar of Thingol down in Menegroth? I mean, yes, we could have those taken down. Yes, we could have the girdle extend down below the earth, right? Mike suggests the dwarves will have to get back in later. It's true, I suppose the ancient tunnels of the petty dwarves could be reopened by the elves of Nogrod later on during the wars. Right. Lots of people are talking about how secretive and shy and afraid of the elves the petty dwarves are. No, I'm cool with that. I don't have a problem with the petty dwarves being there. I have a problem with the petty dwarves getting there. That's my problem. The only way I can see it happening is if the petty dwarves tunneled from Ered Gorgoroth down, right? If the petty dwarves were exiled from over here, right? They were exiled from the Blue Mountains. Where would they go? Not the plains, right? They'd presumably go to the other mountains, right? So what if from the mountains up here? So, but like saying that there's a tunnel network that extends from the arid Gorgoroth all the way to Menegroth seems to me troublesome. Not necessarily insurmountable, but kind of troublesome. Yeah, Chris says that idea stretches credulity. Yes, that is what I'm experiencing, Chris. I am finding my credulity stretched. Not to the breaking point. I could live with it, but it's a lot. A couple people are suggesting that all we need are some wereworms. I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, David, that does seem to be the more radical solution to the problem. It would be much easier to have the grievance of the petty dwarves not be that they were settled in Menegroth and kicked out of it, but that they were settled in Nargothrond and kicked out of it. And indeed, Meme mentions exactly that. Like, we know that the petty dwarves were, in fact, settled in Nargothrond. So we're going to have to deal with that when it comes to the establishment of Nargothrond. Anyway, we could simply put off the petty dwarves entirely. Just postpone the petty dwarves until season 4 and the founding of Nargothrond. I mean, unless anybody else can think of any good way to get the petty dwarves into Menegroth without having them have hundreds of miles worth of subterranean tunnels. And yes, Nick, there is the concern that if it's going to happen in Nargothrond, which I think it should, just for meme's sake, it should, right? Because Meme coming and setting himself up as the king of Nargothrond all by himself, right? Sitting upon the dragon's hoard all by himself, which, by the way, you see the parallel, right? The parallel to Thorin. Thorin, when Thorin is on the dragon's hoard in the mountain, setting himself up as king with almost nobody else there, like in an empty, deserted, destroyed kingdom, but a pile of treasure and near a dead dragon. That's Meme, right? He is recalling the Meme situation exactly, and his own blindness to what's going is like Meme. And Fafnir, of course, absolutely. Yeah, no, Meme is very Fafnir from the very beginning. I mean, Meme is the most Norse of all of Tolkien's dwarves, essentially. Yeah. Yes, when the dragon was actually killed by a man with a black weapon. Yeah. No, the connection. Not to mention the fact that Thorin and Turin's names are almost identical when it comes to that, right? But anyway, whatever. Brianna and Mike are both suggesting maybe Meme could be an outcast Longbeard. Mike suggesting possibly of the line of Durin. Possibly. I could get behind that. But I'm not going to worry about Meme right now. I'm fine, by the way, with people don't want Meme to be deathless. People don't want Meme to be ancient, and we don't want Meme around. That's fine. So what if we just kick the can with the petty dwarves entirely? We don't even have to introduce them now. We could save them for the founding of Nargothrond. That would give us something else to do in season 4, wouldn't it? Yeah, so let's do that. Let's not have the petty dwarves be in Doriath at all, but we can still have... wait, okay. So how do the dwarves of the Blue Mountains know about Menegroth? Do they know about it? Do they know about it? Is it their gift? I like it being their gift, though. But it's going to be easiest for... it's going to be easiest for the dwarves the elves to discover it. Hey, David, I like that. Okay, David Atlee says, what if the dwarves are contracted for help building a defensible hall and they find the caves? Yeah, I like that. What if so the caves are there, right? The 1,000 caves are there, but the elves don't know that they exist, right? The elves are unaware of the existence of the caves. And they bring the dwarves in. They're like, okay, we need defenses. We need a fortification, right? So they're bringing the dwarves in thinking, let's build something, right? Some kind of defensive fortification here in the forest. And they bring the dwarves in as contractors. And when the dwarves are brought in, they're kind of wandering around looking for a good site, and they detect the caves which the elves had never detected before. And they're like, oh, no, wait, guys, this is perfect. Yes, they're acting like exploratory geologists. Exactly, Tony. Yeah. That way, it's still they find this and they love the caves. Indeed, they can have an almost Gimli-esque reaction to Menegroth, right? They could be going all, they could be, going off about the wonder of the caves and everything, and because then we have a nice Aglaron parallel. I think that could work. That could work pretty well. What do you think of that, Dave?
I'm supportive. I like this idea.
You like this idea?
This seems to resolve some of the dilemmas that you're bringing to light.
Okay. All right.
And we're thinking the dwarves don't find the caves and want them for themselves, right?
Right. Or some of them could. I mean, we could show some discussions there could be some of the dwarves who love them and don't want to give them to the elves. And so it's like a sacrifice for the dwarves to, it's like a sign of friendship and sacrifice that the dwarves give them to the, but maybe there are one or two of the elves of the dwarves of Nogrod who are like, we should keep them for ourselves. These caves are awesome. Yeah. Okay. All right, that works. Now, so Thingol gets Menegroth, where we talked about this already. So yeah, we're good. Cool. All right. Excellent. Outside Menegroth, we're finishing up here. We have Círdan and the Elves of the Havens invited to join the Sindar in the safety of Menegroth. So once Menegroth once they're establishing a fortification, the decision that Thingol and Melian should be making here is we need to consolidate. Again, I like the idea of having the Sindar. They're just scattered. They're a wandering people. They hang out all over the place, right? They don't have a central city at all, perhaps. And now but they decide now that the orcs are coming in, and there's more and more reports, and we get those elves that come down from the northern parts there of like south of Ered Gorgoroth and everything. But anyway, they're running down and saying, "Hey, the orcs are we keep running into these groups of orcs," and so they decide, okay, we need to consolidate. So the Sindar are called in, and they take up residence in Doriath, and most of them in Menegroth. So we're gonna extend the invitation. Hey, Círdan the shipwright, come build ships underground. And Círdan's like, dude, that's not practical. So he decides that they want to stay at the havens because staying on the coast is really important. So I think that's an interesting discussion that can totally happen and can be a great way for us to remind people of Círdan's calling, right? He's got to be out with the ships because that's who he is and what he does. But he can give them pearls, right? So this is where they get they get, he's like, oh yeah, you've met these. And so they tell him about the dwarves, and he's like, hey, I bet the dwarves would like these, right? So you get the pearls. We have, okay, so I don't think I like the idea of the green elves crossing in this episode. I want to save the green elves for the next episode. I think there's plenty to do with the fear of the orcs and the desire to build a fortification, and the discussions with the dwarves, and the finding of the caves of Menegroth, and the discussion of, like, do we move underground? The Sindar, many of the Sindar not being huge fans of that, but the dwarves like gushing and weeping at the beauty of the caves of Menegroth, and then setting together and making a nice collaborative project of it, and then the and so I think that this all works. And Mike, yeah, a chance for Celeborn's screen time. Celeborn can go visit Círdan. He can be the messenger sent to Círdan. I agree. Let's give Celeborn some screen time. Why not? Do we even want a teaser, Marie asks, of the Green Elves? Well, here's my issue. And it leads me to my questions for next time. So what happens in this is the second week in a row I've had this as one of my questions, but what happens in this episode? In our outline, we have the Green Elves come to Beleriand. Well, okay, but so what? We're saving the big battle where Bulldog comes in and mows down the Green Elves and kills Denethor is not projected to happen until episode 9, right? So if that's not going to happen, then what do the Green Elves do in the meantime? What is their role in Beleriand? What happens here? What occurs? Especially if we make the Green Elves come in at the end of the previous episode, then what happens in episode whichever we're on, 6? So I'm not. I think that. This is why I'm thinking we're gonna want to save the Green Elves' arrival for next time. Besides which, I like. I think that there's enough in essentially establishing the kingdom of Doriath is basically one of the main things that we're doing through establishing Menegroth. I think it's okay. I think it's going to be enough for that to happen in episode 6. So I would argue that they don't come into episode 6, but I'm still not sure if we can't have a battle and kill off Denethor. I'm not sure exactly what role they're going to be playing at this stage in the Beleriand situation, what kind of impact they have if the fighting's not already going on. Do we have some fighting going on? Like the Bulldog is being sent down in episode 5. Do we have a battle in which the Green Elves help to repel anyway, I'm not sure. So what happens? This is my question. This is the main thing I want you guys to be helping us with over the course of the next few weeks. What does Treebeard do in Beleriand? Treebeard has got to be there, right? We have Treebeard's reminiscences of Beleriand in The Lord of the Rings, right? In his songs, especially the one song that Treebeard sings from himself, right? In the Willow Meads of Tasaranon, right? And he is remembering walking all over Beleriand and breathing. So apart from breathing, what does Treebeard do in Beleriand? And what's Treebeard like? Is he young and hasty, right? Can we have somebody deliver the line, "Slow down, Treebeard"? I don't know. I mean, what happens with Treebeard? What's he like? Do the Entwives come with them, right? Can we have Fimbrethil? If so, is there any change in their relationship? Where are we in the Entwife storyline here? And when does that happen? But what's his role? What's his reaction to the dwarves? Does he meet the dwarves? The Ents and the dwarves? What is the initial relationship between the Ents and the dwarves? Do the dwarves interact with the Green Elves at all? Like what we've established this two-way negotiation, right? This Sindar dwarf relationship. When the Green Elves come in, what's the impact there? How does that work? Tony suggests that Treebeard and Celeborn should meet and become friends. I like that idea. I do think that is Tony, remember the things that Celeborn says about Fangorn and remember when Celeborn greets Treebeard again at the end of The Lord of the Rings, right? It'd be really cool if that's the renewal of a friendship from like thousands of years before. So
we need something. The Ents are going to be there, but apart from being there, what role do they play? What do they do? And again, what's happening in the Angband storyline? Exactly. We're not yet in full invasion, right? Because if we're in full invasion, how do we, or if we are in full invasion, how do we postpone the big Denethor's killed fight all the way through to episode 9? It's still a ways down the road. How do we do that? So I lots of really vague big picture questions about episode 6, because again, it's still the one that is least clear in my mind about what actually occurs. So I want some help with that. Good. All right. So those are the things I want you guys to be thinking and talking about. Now, the fortunate thing, I have lots of big and vague questions, but the good thing is that you have lots of time to think about these things, because we are not going to have SilmFilm again until the beginning of November, until like November 2nd, 3rd, something like that, whenever it is. Then let me look at my calendar.
I think you mean December.
December. That's totally what I mean. December 1st. That is absolutely what I mean. December 1st, because next week I'll be away. The week after that is the day after Thanksgiving. So yes. So 3 weeks from today, which is December 1st, will be the next SilmFilm episode that we will have. So you will have 3 weeks from today to sort that stuff out. All right?